Everything ended the moment paperwork replaced promises. One decision, made quietly and allegedly with legal counsel, pulled Elizabeth out of the show and out of the life viewers thought they knew. No farewell episode. No explanation on screen. 1 week she was there. Next week she vanished. Fans blinked and asked the same thing. How does a marriage, a paycheck, and a TV platform disappear overnight? And why would someone choose a lawsuit over silence when silence paid the bills? This was not a dramatic exit crafted for ratings on 90 Day Fiancé. This felt abrupt, tense, and personal in a way reality TV rarely shows. According to public reporting and alleged filings, the decision carried real risk. Divorce risk, financial risk, reputation risk. The kind of risk people avoid unless staying feels worse. That is the part that should make you pause, because people do not burn their own house down unless the fire is already inside. Online chatter framed the disappearance as scandal or strategy, but those labels miss the weight of the moment. This was not someone chasing drama. This looked like someone choosing fallout over fear, choosing exposure over endurance, choosing a future with no cameras over a present that no longer felt safe. And right when you think this was about money or fame, the story stops short, because the reason for the choice changes everything. And that part comes next. Before all of this, viewers thought they understood the relationship. On screen, Elizabeth played the familiar role, the calm one, the mediator, the person forever stuck between a loud husband and an even louder family. Every dinner turned tense. Every holiday felt one comment away from chaos. And she stayed smiling through it, nodding, explaining, smoothing things over like a full-time job nobody paid her for. You watched her defend Andrei again and again on 90 Day Fiancé, against her siblings, against her parents, against fans online. She took heat so he did not have to. And honestly, most people laughed it off. This was the show. Family drama, raised voices, awkward hugs, rinse and repeat. You know what I mean. It felt messy, but manageable, entertaining even. But here is the part most viewers missed while laughing through the chaos. That edit painted her as peace-loving, but peace comes at a cost. Every time she quieted a fight, she swallowed a concern. Every time she defended him, she pushed her own doubts aside. The show framed her patience as strength. The audience accepted that framing without question. Many even praised it. Strong woman, loyal wife, ride or die. Yet the longer it went on, the more the dynamic stopped feeling funny. Family arguments kept circling the same issues: control, money, respect. Her voice stayed calm while the pressure around her kept rising. Looking back, the pattern feels obvious. At the time, it blended into the background noise of reality TV. And that should make you uneasy. Because when chaos becomes normal, the warning signs hide in plain sight. Away from the noise of family dinners and group arguments, something quieter started shifting. Not explosive, not obvious, small enough to ignore if you wanted to keep the peace. According to accounts shared later and framed carefully as alleged, the first signs were financial details that did not line up. Accounts that looked different than expected. Decisions explained quickly and then brushed past. Moments where asking follow-up questions felt awkward rather than urgent. Nothing screamed emergency. That is what makes this part uncomfortable. When money behavior changes slowly, confusion blends into trust. Elizabeth reportedly believed what she was told because believing was easier than pushing back. Filming schedules were busy. Business plans sounded complicated. The show blurred lines between personal and professional income. Silence slid in as a coping move. Not agreement, not approval, survival. On screen, she stayed composed. Off screen, sources suggest she felt uncertain but unsure how to voice it without starting another war. The pattern felt familiar. When tension rose, she softened. When doubts appeared, she swallowed them. Control does not always arrive through shouting. Sometimes it shows up through information gaps. Who knows what? Who decides what matters? Who gets told after the fact? And this is where silence starts feeling safer than questions. The unease grew without drama. No slammed doors. No screaming matches. Just a steady hum of discomfort she learned to live with. Asking too much risked conflict. Saying nothing kept things calm, at least on the surface. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to tell the difference between trust and avoidance. That quiet choice mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Because once you accept confusion as normal, The ground shifts under your feet without making a sound. Silence often gets mislabeled as loyalty. People praise it, reward it, call it strength. When someone stays quiet through tension, others say they are mature or patient or the bigger person. What they rarely ask is what silence costs the person holding it. Endurance feels noble until it starts eating at your sense of self. From the outside, Elizabeth looked steady. Calm voice, careful words, always explaining, always smoothing things over. Defending harder each time because pulling back would raise questions she was not ready to answer. Doubt creeps in quietly. First you wonder if you misunderstood. Then you assume you overreacted. Then you tell yourself keeping the peace matters more than being right. That cycle feels familiar to many people watching at home. Silence works because it lowers the temperature. It avoids blow-ups. It keeps the day moving. It also shifts responsibility. The person staying quiet carries the weight, so others stay comfortable. Over time, that habit becomes identity. The peacemaker, the loyal one, the fixer. Walking away from that role feels like betrayal, even when staying hurts, and this is the moment silence stops protecting the relationship and starts protecting the wrong person. You do not wake up one day and decide to disappear. You arrive there after 1,000 small choices to hold your tongue. Each one makes the next easier. Each one trains you to doubt your instincts. By the time the cost becomes clear, speaking up feels dangerous and staying quiet feels familiar. That is why this story hits deeper than TV drama. It forces a question many people avoid. At what point does loyalty turn into self-erasure? And once you cross that line, how do you find your way back? As the pressure grew, the balance inside the relationship shifted in ways viewers had already seen but did not name. On screen, control showed up through decisions made fast and explained later, through raised voices framed as passion, through statements about who provided and who owed loyalty in return. These were not insults. These were behaviors played out publicly and defended openly. Fame changed the stakes. The show paid bills. The show created relevance. The show turned conflict into currency. When income and identity depend on staying together, leaving stops feeling like a personal choice and starts feeling like sabotage. Elizabeth was not only a wife on camera. She was part of a brand, a storyline, a paycheck. Walking away from that meant risking more than a relationship. It meant losing stability and public footing all at once. Public statements leaned into that imbalance. The idea that success came from one side. The suggestion that gratitude should outweigh discomfort. When someone hears often enough that their life exists because of another person, doubt settles deep. You start asking permission to feel uneasy. You start shrinking your needs so the structure stays intact. And this is where loyalty quietly turns into risk, because once loyalty carries consequences, it stops being voluntary. It becomes enforced. Staying no longer feels like love. It feels like obligation. Viewers saw flashes of this dynamic without context. Arguments brushed off as personality clashes. Defenses framed as strength. The pressure did not explode all at once. It tightened slowly, like a knot, pulled a little more each time. And here is the part nobody wants to admit. When walking away feels impossible, staying becomes dangerous. That realization does not arrive gently. It lands heavy. And once it does, every choice after carries weight, especially the next one. Then came the moment everything changed. Not in a dramatic argument or a viral clip, but quietly, with documents and a realization that silence was no longer neutral. Allegedly, Elizabeth learned that ignoring the discrepancies could put her at risk legally, that the choices she made to avoid conflict might actually carry consequences she could not control. The fear she had lived with for years shifted direction. It was no longer about what he might do to her if she spoke. It became about what could happen if she stayed silent. For someone used to thinking loyalty meant endurance, this was a jolt. The lines between love, duty, and self-preservation blurred instantly. Staying quiet, which had always felt like strength, suddenly appeared as a risk she could not afford. She reportedly started collecting information quietly, keeping track of communications and financial irregularities, not for revenge, but to protect herself if the situation escalated. Every note, every record, every small observation became a lifeline. On screen, she remained composed. Off screen, the tension twisted inward. Those closest to her noticed a change. Careful words replaced explanations. Cautious movements replaced easy gestures. Every interaction carried weight. Allegedly, the fear was no longer about confrontation. It was about survival. The person who had long been the peacemaker now realized that her silence had been enabling something far larger than arguments or disagreements. Because the moment you see that protecting someone else could destroy you, everything before that feels like a warning. Ignored. At this point, viewers might think they know the next move. But awareness is not action. Knowing that something must change and choosing what to do about it are two different battles. The awareness alone fractures certainty. And in that fragile space, the next choice, whether to stay, to speak, or to act, becomes heavier than anything that came before. That tension hangs in the air, impossible to ignore, as the story teeters on the edge of transformation. Once the paperwork was in motion, everything shifted faster than anyone expected. The alleged filing reportedly triggered a chain reaction that left fans and insiders reeling. Public appearances stopped. Filming schedules allegedly froze. Social media went quiet in ways that made people notice immediately. The shock was not in headlines or statements, it was in absence. One moment Elizabeth was there, the next she seemed to vanish, leaving a swirl of questions nobody could answer. Andrei reportedly reacted with anger and disbelief. The public narrative he had relied on, loyalty, partnership, shared success, crumbled almost overnight. Fans speculated online, trying to piece together what they saw with what they suspected was happening off camera. Rumors spread, but the truth, as far as anyone outside legal counsel could verify, remained tightly contained. Even without direct statements, the tension was palpable. Everyone was watching, but no one fully understood the stakes. The ripple effect did not stop with the couple. Friends and family who had once been mediators or allies reportedly had to choose sides carefully. Being close carried risk. Being distant offered safety, but came with emotional cost. Every move carried consequences, and each choice intensified the pressure. Allegedly, the weight of public scrutiny combined with private legal risk created a tense, almost impossible environment to navigate, because once the first domino falls, nobody knows which one will hit last. Suddenly, this was no longer a story about disagreement or petty squabbles. The question was not who was right, it was who would lose the most and who would survive the fallout. Everything familiar, the cameras, the brand, the identity built around a reality show, was at risk of disappearing. The stakes had escalated from personal to existential. What had started as confusion and small cracks behind the scenes now threatened to consume everyone involved. And the next move would determine whether anyone walked away intact. Almost as soon as the filing allegedly became known, the network reacted quietly but decisively. Reports suggest that executives pulled Elizabeth and Andrei from all current and upcoming projects. Contracts were frozen. Storylines were abandoned. Nothing was announced publicly, leaving fans to notice gaps and wonder what had happened. The disappearance was sudden. One moment they were part of the franchise, the next they were absent, and nobody on the outside received an explanation. This was not a judgment about who was right or wrong. It was risk management. Networks depend on predictability. Allegedly, even the hint of legal exposure tied to financial disputes is enough to halt production. Reality shows thrive on drama, but real-life liability changes the rules. Removing them quickly protected the network from potential lawsuits and reputational damage, but it also left a void that fans could not ignore. Viewers noticed immediately. Social media discussions erupted. People compared episodes, rewound clips, and scrolled through posts looking for clues. The absence of answers created a vacuum where speculation thrived. The show continued with new couples, but the silence around Elizabeth and Andrei amplified curiosity. What had really happened behind the scenes? Why did the platform vanish so fast? Those questions kept the audience engaged, even as the couple faded from view. Because platforms built on fame disappear faster than we expect when risk enters the room, the sudden erasure reminded everyone how fragile visibility can be. One legal step, one mismanaged situation, and what once seemed permanent screen time, exposure, career momentum can vanish in days. For Elizabeth, the network's silence was a reminder of just how quickly stability built on external validation can crumble. For fans, it was a lesson in how quickly reality TV characters can go from central figures to missing pieces of a puzzle nobody can solve. Once the disappearance became visible, public reaction exploded in predictable and unpredictable ways. Social media divided into camps almost instantly. Some framed Elizabeth as the victim, praising courage and questioning why anyone would endure silence that carried risk. Others leaned toward Andrei, seeing the filing as betrayal, as a breakdown of loyalty, or as a stunt that endangered shared income and identity. Fans constructed narratives quickly, assigning moral labels without full context, because that is what platforms encourage. Allegedly, this split created pressure the couple did not need. Every comment, every theory, every thread became another test of loyalty. Strangers judged decisions made in private, without seeing the nuance behind choices. The moral weight of public opinion can be crushing. Support and condemnation arrive simultaneously, forcing anyone caught in the middle to navigate judgment while managing real, legal consequences. Observers might think it is just online drama, but when fans hold up loyalty as a standard, silence as betrayal, and endurance as strength, the effect is personal. The pattern also exposed something subtle. People want clear heroes and villains. The reality here was not simple. Alleged actions existed in shades of gray. Decisions were strategic, protective, and fearful. Yet the public conversation reduced them to right or wrong. That tension mirrors what the couple allegedly experienced privately for years. When your life, money, and identity are entwined, every decision is scrutinized, and every choice carries amplified consequence, and it leaves one question that lingers for anyone watching closely. What would you do if staying quiet meant risking everything? And speaking up risked losing everything too? The split among viewers highlights the unfair weight of judgment when we see only fragments of a story. It forces reflection on loyalty, fear, and self-preservation, and leaves a sense of unease. The narrative grows sharper because the answers are not easy, and the consequences are real. Once the cameras stopped rolling, reality hit in full force. Fame, exposure, and the constant hum of public attention disappeared overnight. Allegedly, Elizabeth faced the sudden quiet alone. No producers to mediate, no scripted drama to redirect focus. The identity she had built around being a peacemaker, a wife, a fixture on the show, was gone. Without the platform, without the storyline, the habits that had kept her steady on camera now felt heavy. Silence no longer protected anyone. Instead, it carried weight. Every unspoken question and every deferred concern became a reminder of what had been lost. Isolation was immediate. Friends reportedly pulled back, unsure what to say or do, cautious about stepping into legal or social fallout. Family dynamics shifted too. People who had once been confidants became observers, evaluating what side to take or whether to stay away entirely. The absence of cameras removed the performative layer that had previously structured every interaction. What remained was raw, quiet, and according to insiders, emotionally draining. Andrei experienced the withdrawal differently. Allegedly, the power he had exercised on camera, amplified by visibility and income, lost its effect. Without the audience, the leverage faded. Authority and control became less about strategy and more about reality. The public stage that once supported conflict no longer existed. For both, the world outside the show was unfamiliar and unforgiving, because when the applause stops, you are left with only yourself and the consequences of every choice. This stage of life, first reflection. Rebuilding became about small decisions, careful steps, and emotional recalibration. Fame had masked vulnerability. Its absence revealed it. Silence, which once felt like survival, now felt heavier, a reminder of boundaries crossed and trust compromised. And yet, the necessity to move forward remained. The quiet demanded new strength, and the next chapter still unwritten would test resilience in ways a camera never could. Looking back at the episodes, everything feels different through this new lens. Those fights over small things, the insistence on keeping explanations short, the careful management of what got shown on camera, what once seemed like typical reality TV chaos now appears as subtle signals. The tiny cracks in communication, the quick excuses, the sudden changes in tone all take on new weight when you see them as part of a pattern rather than isolated incidents, allegedly. Every moment of confusion or hesitation was a signal that silence was being used strategically, by both fear and habit, to maintain control. On screen, it looked like playful tension or family drama. Off screen, it may have been the quiet preparation for bigger consequences. The peacemaker role, the moments Elizabeth smiled while deflecting conflict, the way arguments escalated and subsided, all of it reframes as choices made under pressure. What once entertained now warns. The audience begins to sense the shift in understanding. It's no longer about who was right, who yelled the loudest, or whose family intervened. It's about who had the power, how it was exercised, and who silently bore the cost. Every ignored discrepancy, every small act of endurance, every calculated word, adds up to a pattern that feels both deliberate and devastating. In the end, the story does not tie up neatly. There is no applause, no hero, edit, no satisfying resolution. What remains is the weight of choices made in silence, the cost of enduring to protect, and the realization that sometimes protecting others comes at the expense of yourself. Allegedly, Elizabeth's decision to act, to step forward despite risk, was not about revenge or drama. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming control over a life that had been quietly managed by fear and expectation for too long. Choosing truth is never easy. Choosing peace can feel safer. But here, both paths carry consequences. Silence may protect the moment, but it risks the future. Speaking out may cost everything known and familiar, yet it preserves the self. Fans can see glimpses on screen of arguments and reconciliations, but the full emotional toll exists off camera, in quiet spaces, in moments of doubt and fear. The story lingers in that tension, the part we feel but cannot quantify, because sometimes the hardest battles happen when no one is watching. The lessons are subtle but sharp. The patterns repeat: power dynamics, silence, endurance, and the collision of loyalty with risk are not unique to one couple. The franchise is full of relationships tested under pressure, where decisions behind closed doors ripple publicly. Viewers who follow closely notice the echoes, the same stakes, the same moments of doubt, the same question: do you protect the relationship or protect yourself? And as the cameras roll elsewhere, the question remains, quietly but insistently: who else is facing the choice between truth and silence? And what will it cost them when the story finally comes to light? The next chapter is waiting, and it promises the same tension, the same stakes, and the same emotional reckoning.